It was a chilly evening when Alara, the world-famous singer, finished a late-night rehearsal. The bright city lights were a stark contrast to the shadowy alley she found herself walking through. Lost in her thoughts, she was startled by the faint sound of a baby crying. The sound tugged at her heartstrings, pulling her toward a big yellow dustbin. As she approached, the cries grew louder, echoing in the empty street. Peering over the rim, Alara's breath caught in her throat. There, nestled among discarded wrappers and food remnants, was a tiny infant, swaddled in a grimy blanket. Panic surged through her. Without hesitation, she scooped up the baby, cradling the fragile form against her chest. The infant's cries faded as she comforted the little one, instinctively feeling a bond form between them. She quickly settled into her car, the warmth of the vehicle contrasting sharply with the cold, hard world outside. As she drove home, thoughts of the abandoned child filled her mind. What kind of mother could leave such a precious life behind? Back in her luxurious penthouse, Alara placed the baby on her plush sofa, assessing her new responsibility. The child's eyes were wide and curious, and despite the circumstances, Alara felt an inexplicable warmth radiating from the baby. After calming the infant with a gentle lullaby, she decided to post a photo of their first night together on Instagram, hoping to find the baby's family or at least garner some sympathy. However, the response was not what she expected. Despite her millions of followers, the post was met with an eerie silence. As the days passed, the baby remained an enigma, an unwelcome secret in Alara's otherwise glamorous life. She felt an overwhelming need to protect the child, leading her to take the first steps toward adopting the baby legally. As she sat at her kitchen table, filling out adoption papers, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The child was too quiet, too calm, and Alara's heart raced as the shadows of doubt began to creep in. The following week, Alara became increasingly attached to the baby, whom she named Lyra. The singer's once lively home was now filled with the sounds of cooing and soft cries. Yet, the eerie quietness of Lyra's demeanor began to concern Alara. The baby rarely cried, only when she needed to be fed or changed. It was as if Lyra understood the weight of her existence and the burden it placed on Alara. During a late-night feed, Alara heard strange noises outside her apartment. Heart racing, she peered through the window but saw nothing. The city seemed alive with secrets, and she was no longer sure of her safety. Did someone see her take Lyra? Could the baby's past come back to haunt her? Alara's instincts told her to be wary, igniting a need to protect her newfound daughter at all costs. The idea of someone lurking in the shadows sent chills down her spine. And she decided to hire a private investigator to uncover any information about the baby's origins. But who would have left such a precious life in a garbage bin? Days turned into weeks, and Alara found solace in the routine of motherhood. Yet a nagging feeling of unease lingered. The private investigator, Lucas, finally reported back. The information was alarming. The baby had been reported missing from a local hospital. Lyra's mother had been found, but the circumstances surrounding the abandonment remained murky. There was talk of a dangerous family involved in human trafficking, and Alara's heart raced as she realized the implications. Determined to protect Lyra, Alara strengthened her resolve. She contacted the authorities, providing them with every detail she could remember about that fateful night. Her instincts told her to stay vigilant. The glamorous world of stardom suddenly felt less secure, and the shadows of her past began to creep back into her life. As she searched for answers, Elara couldn't help but feel a looming threat drawing closer, inching toward her precious daughter. It was a game of cat and mouse, and she refused to be the one caught. With the help of Lucas, she began to piece together the mystery surrounding Lyra's disappearance. One night, as she scrolled through her phone, a notification popped up from an anonymous account, sending chills down her spine. "You took what isn't yours." The message was brief, yet it felt heavy with implication. Who was watching her? The feeling of paranoia grew as Elara realized that someone out there was intent on reclaiming Lyra, a baby who had unknowingly become the center of a dark web of crime. As she tucked Lyra into her crib that night, the singer vowed to protect her at all costs. The bond they shared had become unbreakable, and she refused to let anyone tear them apart. Elara spent sleepless nights researching the underground world of trafficking, growing more horrified by the day. Each article she read only deepened her resolve to protect Lyra. She learned that families often became involved in a cycle of violence, and the longer she waited to expose the truth, the more danger they faced. Lucas suggested they go into hiding until they could gather enough evidence to bring down the organization behind Lyra's abandonment. Elara agreed, but the thought of uprooting her life terrified her. How would she maintain her career? Would her fans understand her sudden absence? The decision weighed heavily on her heart, but Lyra's safety was paramount. Elara packed their essentials and arranged for a private plane to take them to a remote location, far away from prying eyes. As she held Lyra close, she felt a sense of determination wash over her. They were leaving behind the glitz and glamour of fame, but she knew that together they could face any challenge. Settling into a small, secluded cabin in the woods, Elara and Lyra found a strange sense of peace. Surrounded by nature, the world felt miles away. Elara took to recording her thoughts in a journal, documenting every moment with Lyra, trying to keep the darkness at bay. As the days turned into weeks, the baby began to blossom, and Elara found joy in the simple routines of motherhood. But the sense of tranquility was deceptive. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the tranquil silence was shattered by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Elara's heart raced as she peered through the window, her breath hitching in her throat. A black SUV pulled up in front of the cabin, and several figures stepped out, casting long shadows on the ground. Panic surged through Elara as she grabbed Lyra and darted to the back of the cabin, praying they hadn't been spotted. The moment felt surreal, like a scene from a horror movie, and Elara knew she had to act quickly to protect her daughter. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, Elara quietly crept through the woods, clutching Lyra close. The rustling leaves echoed their hurried movements, and the looming threat behind them sent chills down her spine. The figures in the SUV were searching for them, and the isolation of the woods felt both a blessing and a curse. Elara's mind raced as she considered their options. She could hide in the woods, but for how long? They needed help, and the closest town was miles away. With the urgency of a mother's instinct, she decided to head toward the town, hoping to find refuge among the locals. The night air was thick with tension, and every snap of a twig made her heart leap. She pushed herself to run faster, guided by the faint glow of distant lights that promised safety. The fear of being caught propelled her forward, and as she reached the edge of the woods, she saw a small diner, an oasis in the chaos. Bursting through the door of the diner, Elara was met with curious gazes. The warm air wrapped around them, offering a momentary reprieve from the chill outside. As she approached the counter, the waitress gave her a concerned look, taking in the sight of the frantic mother and her baby. "Are you okay?" she asked, and Alara nodded, her throat dry with fear. "I need help," she whispered, feeling the weight of her desperation. The waitress nodded, leading Alara to a booth in the corner. She glanced over her shoulder, expecting to see the figures from the woods behind her. But the diner felt like a sanctuary. She quickly pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Lucas's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice a lifeline. "Alara, where are you?" Panic laced his tone, and she quickly explained their situation. They needed to get out of the diner and find a safe place to hide, and Lucas promised to send help. As they waited for Lucas, Alara's anxiety began to creep back in. The diner was filled with the sounds of clinking dishes and casual conversations. But for Alara, time felt suspended. Every minute stretched into eternity, and she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closing in. The waitress returned with a cup of coffee, offering a reassuring smile. But Alara barely noticed. Her thoughts were consumed with the fear that they might be discovered at any moment. She cast glances toward the entrance, expecting to see familiar dark figures stepping inside, their intentions unmistakably sinister. Just as Alara began to lose hope, the door swung open and Lucas entered. Relief flooded through her as he approached with urgency, scanning the diner for threats. "We need to move. Now," he said, his voice low but firm. He gestured for Alara to follow him out the back door, and she did so, clutching Lyra tightly against her chest. The waitress watched them leave with a mix of concern and curiosity. But Alara didn't have time to explain. They slipped into the alley behind the diner, where the shadows loomed larger, and Alara felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Lucas led them to a discreet vehicle parked in the shadows. As they climbed in, Alara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "What's the plan?" she asked, her heart racing. Lucas glanced at her, his face serious. "We're going to lay low for a while, gather more intel on who's after you. But we need to get you and Lyra somewhere safe first." With the engine purring to life, Alara's heartbeat in sync with the revving motor, each pulse echoing the urgency of their situation. As the vehicle sped away from the diner, Alara felt a surge of mixed emotions: relief, fear, and determination. They drove for what felt like hours, winding through back roads and avoiding major highways. Lucas kept his eyes on the road, but Alara couldn't help but glance at the baby in her arms. Lyra was quiet, her wide eyes reflecting the fear that resonated in Alara's heart. Finally, they arrived at a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods, far away from prying eyes. It was rustic and worn, but it felt safe, a temporary haven from the chaos. As they entered, Lucas quickly set about securing the windows and doors. "We'll stay here until I can gather more information on the organization chasing you," he said, his demeanor serious but calm. Alara nodded, grateful for his presence, but feeling a nagging worry. The stakes were higher than ever, and the threat lurking in the shadows felt palpable. As the hours turned into days, Alara found herself oscillating between anxiety and the bliss of motherhood. She spent her days caring for Lyra, but every sound outside sent her heart racing. On the third day, Lucas returned with unsettling news. "I found out more about the group looking for you. They're dangerous, and they won't stop until they find what they want." Alara felt the weight of those words settle in her chest, like a stone. She had to protect Lyra, but at what cost? Days turned into weeks. And as time passed, Ilara's sanctuary began to feel like a gilded cage. She was grateful for Lucas's protection, but his presence also heightened her paranoia. She often caught him glancing at her with an intensity that made her uneasy. Was he just concerned for her safety? Or did he have ulterior motives? The isolation gnawed at her, making her question everything. One evening, after putting Lyra to bed, Ilara confronted Lucas. "You've been acting strange. I need to know I can trust you completely." Lucas hesitated, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite decipher. "I'm here to help you, Ilara. I promise. But the truth is, I'm also trying to protect myself." The admission hung heavy in the air. "From what?" Ilara pressed, feeling her heart race. "From the organization. They've got eyes everywhere." Ilara's breath caught. She couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was hiding something from her, and she wondered if their fates were more intertwined than she'd realized. As doubts clouded her mind, she decided to dig deeper into Lucas's past, hoping to uncover the truth before it was too late. After all, trust was a fragile thing, and in a world full of secrets, it could shatter at any moment. With the night creeping in and shadows thickening, Ilara began to take matters into her own hands. She searched through Lucas's belongings while he was away, looking for any clue that might explain his secretive behavior. Her heart raced as she rifled through papers, finding nothing but the usual: maps, notes about the organization, and a few personal items that hinted at a complicated past. Yet, there was no definitive answer, and frustration boiled within her. That night, Ilara made a decision. She would no longer be a passive participant in her fate. As she lay in bed, the weight of responsibility heavy on her chest, she resolved to uncover the truth about the organization hunting them, and ultimately, the truth about Lucas. She needed to protect Lyra, and that meant taking risks she hadn't considered before. Days later, Ilara received a message from an unknown number, and her heart raced. "I know where you are. You can't hide from us." The words chilled her to the bone. Panic surged as she realized the danger they were in. She quickly forwarded the message to Lucas when he returned. He paled as he read it, the color draining from his face. "They found us," he whispered, his voice heavy with dread. Ilara felt a cold rush of fear wash over her. Their time in the woods was running out, and they had to make a move, fast. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ilara and Lucas prepared to leave the cabin. They packed essentials, their hearts heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Ilara knew they couldn't stay any longer. They had to find a way to protect Lyra. Before they left, Lucas shared a plan. They would head to a safe house in the city, a place where they could regroup and gather resources. Just as they were about to leave, a loud crash echoed outside, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Ilara's heart raced as she glanced at Lucas, who nodded, signaling her to stay back. He cautiously approached the door, peering through the cracked frame. "Stay here," he ordered, and Ilara nodded, gripping Lyra tightly against her chest. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Ilara could feel the tension in the air. Her mind raced with thoughts of what could happen next. Were they too late? Had their pursuers finally caught up with them? Lucas stepped back, his expression grave. "We need to go now," he urged, and Ilara's heart sank. With one last look at the cabin that had been their refuge, they slipped into the night, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The drive into the city was tense, the weight of fear pressing down on them. Ilara clutched Lyra tightly, whispering soft words of comfort as they navigated the dimly lit streets. Lucas remained focused, his jaw clenched in determination. They finally reached the safe house, a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood. Ilara felt a mix of relief and apprehension as they entered. Inside, the air was thick with uncertainty. They had arrived in the belly of the beast, where danger lurked in every corner. Lucas had set up a temporary safe space, but Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As the hours passed, Ilara tried to distract herself with Lyra's laughter, but the tension in the air was palpable. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, causing Ilara's heart to leap into her throat. Lucas exchanged a worried glance with her before moving cautiously toward the door. "Who is it?" he called, his voice steady but laced with anxiety. There was a pause before a familiar voice responded. "It's me, Emma." Relief washed over Ilara as Lucas opened the door, revealing a trusted friend from Ilara's past. Emma stepped inside, her expression serious as she surveyed the room. "I've been worried about you," she said, her voice low. "I heard about the baby and the trouble you've been in. We need to talk." Ilara felt a rush of gratitude for her friend's arrival. Emma had always been a fierce protector, and having her by their side was a comfort amidst the chaos. As they settled down, Emma shared her findings. "I've been doing some digging of my own. The organization that's after you is more powerful than you can imagine. They've infiltrated several areas, including law enforcement." The words sent a chill down Ilara's spine. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emma's gaze turned serious. "We have to gather evidence against them. If we can expose them, we can bring them down. But it's risky." Ilara felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. Could they really take on such a formidable adversary? They had to try. Together, the three of them devised a plan, their whispered voices echoing in the empty room. Ilara was determined to protect Lyra, even if it meant stepping into the eye of the storm. With their plan in motion, Ilara and Lucas knew time was running out. The organization would stop at nothing to find them, and they needed to act quickly. Emma suggested they gather more intel from a former insider who might have information on their enemies. "It's a gamble," she warned. "But we need to know what we're up against." They set out under the cover of darkness, Ilara clutching Lyra close as they made their way through the shadowy streets. Lucas took the lead, guiding them to a rundown bar, known for attracting the kind of people who lived on the fringes. The air was thick with tension as they entered, and Ilara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was a world far removed from the safety of their cabin, a world where danger lurked around every corner. They found the insider sitting at a booth in the back, a man with a shifty gaze and a guarded demeanor. "You're looking for trouble," he said, eyeing Ilara and Lyra warily. Lucas exchanged a look with Ilara, silently urging her to trust him. "We need information about the organization," he said, his tone firm. The man hesitated, then leaned in closer. "They've got eyes everywhere. You're playing a dangerous game." The conversation turned tense as the insider divulged more information, revealing the organization's ruthless tactics. "They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way," he warned. Ilara's heart raced, the weight of their situation crashing down on her. She knew they had to be cautious, but the desire to protect her daughter fueled her determination. As they left the bar, Ilara felt the atmosphere shift. It was as if they had crossed an invisible line, stepping deeper into a world fraught with danger. The insider's warnings echoed in her mind as they navigated the streets, each shadow threatening to swallow them whole. Just when they thought they could breathe, a familiar black car appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the night. "Run!" Lucas shouted, adrenaline surging through him as they sprinted down the alley. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, the sound drowning out the world around her. She clutched Lyra tightly, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The car roared to life, its engine revving with malicious intent as it chased after them. Ilara glanced back, panic rising as the car closed in, its headlights illuminating the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. They darted into a narrow alleyway, desperate to lose the pursuing vehicle. The echo of footsteps behind them spurred Ilara onward, but her legs felt heavy, fatigue creeping in. Just when she thought they had lost them, the car screeched to a halt, and figures emerged, silhouetted against the bright headlights. "Split up!" Lucas shouted, urging Ilara to take a different path. Without thinking, she nodded and ran, her breath hitching in her throat as she darted into the maze of alleys. She could hear the shouts behind her, but the primal instinct to protect Lyra fueled her escape. Ilara's heart raced as she turned corners, desperate to find a safe place to hide. Each step felt like a gamble, each sound amplified in the stillness of the night. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her, and her thoughts raced with fear. Would she ever be able to escape this nightmare? After what felt like an eternity of running, Ilara finally stumbled upon a small. It was cramped and filled with supplies, but it offered a momentary sanctuary. Ilara pressed herself against the wall. Lyra nestled close, her small fingers clutching Ilara's shirt, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. She stepped into the shadows, Lyra clinging tightly to her side, both of them filled with determination. Ilara moved cautiously through the alley, listening for any sign of danger. The tension in the air was palpable as they approached the end, where the alley opened onto a busier street. Just as she turned the corner, she spotted the black car parked nearby, its menacing presence making her heart race. "We need to get out of here," Ilara urged Lyra, her voice urgent. They needed to move quickly. As they dashed across the street, she could feel the eyes of the organization on them, lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, the car's engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped towards them, tires screeching against the pavement. "Run!" Ilara shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins as they sprinted towards a nearby park. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, but she focused on keeping Lyra safe. They ducked behind trees, the night air thick with the scent of danger. In a desperate bid for survival, Ilara remembered the old abandoned building just beyond the park. It was risky, but it could provide them with a place to hide. They dashed toward it, Lyra's small feet barely keeping pace as they slipped inside through a broken window. Inside, the building was dark and eerie, but Ilara felt a flicker of hope. They could hear footsteps outside, the voices of their pursuers growing louder. She quickly led Lyra to a corner where they crouched behind a pile of debris, their breaths shallow. "Mommy, I'm scared," Lyra whispered, her small voice breaking Ilara's heart. She wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her tightly. "I know, sweetheart, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you." The footsteps stopped, and Ilara felt her heart racing as she strained to listen. A moment later, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was one of the organization's agents, scanning the room with a flashlight. Ilara's breath hitched as she instinctively shielded Lyra with her body, praying they wouldn't be discovered. As the agent moved deeper into the building, Elara felt a surge of courage. She had to protect Lyra at all costs. She quickly grabbed a rusty pipe nearby, her hands trembling. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the other side of the building, a distraction. Elara seized the moment, her instincts kicking in. "Stay here," she whispered to Lyra, then moved cautiously toward the noise. As she rounded a corner, she found Lucas fighting off two agents, his back against the wall, as he tried to hold them off. "Get Lyra out!" he shouted, his voice strained. Elara's heart raced as she saw one of the agents pull out a weapon. Without thinking, she charged forward, swinging the pipe with all her might. It connected with the agent's knee, sending him crashing to the ground. "Lucas!" she yelled, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Together, they fought back against the remaining agents, their combined strength a powerful force. The chaos was deafening, but the bond between them gave Elara the courage she needed. After a fierce struggle, the agents were defeated, leaving only silence in their wake. Elara and Lucas stood panting, their eyes wide with disbelief. "We did it!" Elara gasped, relief washing over her. As they hurried to find Lyra, they heard her soft voice calling from the shadows. Elara's heart swelled with joy as she rushed toward her daughter. Lucas knelt down, wrapping his arms around both of them. "We're safe now," he said, his voice filled with warmth. Elara felt a deep sense of gratitude for the moment, for the love that had carried them through the darkness. As they left the abandoned building, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their ordeal begin to lift. They had survived, and with that, they were ready to start anew. Elara smiled down at Lyra, who looked up with innocent wonder. "What now, Mommy?" Elara knelt down, her heart full. "Now, we find our way home." Together, they walked into the light of a new day, ready to embrace the future and all the possibilities it held.